Comrades, in World War II there were several strange incidents, many of them in fact. One of those being the moment when Rudolf Hess, one of Hitler's most trusted guys, got on a plane, went to Scotland to engage in talks with Churchill. That's a big deal when basically the second in command of the country you're fighting just all of a sudden shows up and wants to talk to you. Now in history this has been played off as just the act of a madman that didn't mean anything and that just made no sense. A historian in the UK thinks that he has sufficient evidence to prove what he was actually in the UK for. Peter Padfield, the UK historian, says that he has sufficient evidence to show that when Rudolf Hess actually went over to the UK, he was there to try to strike a deal with Churchill. That deal was, if Germany promised to pull all of its forces out of Western Europe, in exchange, the Allies would let Germany go after the USSR unhindered. They were willing to trade half of Europe in order for a free hand to go after the Soviet Union. Now he's just written a book where he claims that there was a document that was brought to Churchill for consideration. Now he claims he's got the testimony of people who saw the document and translators who actually worked on a translation of the document form. Now the document, according to him, it did come in English as well as a German translation, but they also wanted their own translation of the document just to make sure that it was correct. That he believes, this historian believes that he has enough to prove that this is true. An important figure that he has on his side that's backing him up on this. Now, the man has recently passed away, but he told him the story of how it happened. He was one of the people who went to look over the document. So the testimony of this individual, who was an academic at the time, seems to be the primary source for this seemingly outrageous claim. Now here's some more information that's contained in the article. The informant said that the first 2 pages of the treaty detailed Hitler's precise aims in Russia, followed by sections detailing how Britain could keep its independence, empire, and armed services, and how the Nazis would withdraw from Western Europe. The treaty proposed a state of, German for well-wishing neutrality between Britain and Germany for the latter's offensive against the USSR. The informant even said that the date of Hitler's coming attack on the East was disclosed. Now he believes that the information about this was suppressed because at the time Churchill was supposedly still trying to get the US involved in the war on the side of the Allies. Now, it was also claimed that the reason that this information was probably suppressed was that it would have been very harmful to him politically. A lot of the governments in exile from Western Europe were actually in the UK looking for support, and this kind of thing would probably have been a kind of political suicide had it been made public, whether he accepted it or not. In the records, there is no official account of this document actually existing. Now, the author of this book, Padfield, believes that there has been a very long time running cover-up to prevent this information from getting out. In fact, the informant actually once asked his superiors about it, and they basically told him to be quiet, and then he cut off communication with them and didn't want to speak about it ever again. Now, here's some more information added by Padfield. If the royal family was seriously involved in compromised peace plans, that would be very damaging, though I think it more likely that Hess brought news to Churchill of the coming Holocaust. It could damage perceptions of his and Britain's wartime record if that were released. This was a turning point of the war. Churchill could have accepted the offer, but he made a very moral choice. He was determined that Hitler, who could not be trusted, would not get away with it. He wanted the US in the war and to defeat Hitler. Even more interesting is that Padfield thinks that he has enough evidence to show that not only does this document exist, but that it suffered from subsequent cover-ups, that there's been cover-ups over all these decades, trying to prevent the knowledge of this document from ever having existed. Now, obviously, there was no way Churchill was ever going to take this deal. I mean, come on. Let's say, for argument's sake, that the Nazis could have actually beaten the Soviets, which actually recent information shows that they couldn't have. Now, let's say they get in, and they win. Well, what happens? Hitler takes the oil fields in Baku. He takes the entire Soviet Union. He now has a hold of one of the most industrialized nations of the world at the time. The Soviet Union was a massive industrial base, especially for war materials, which Stalin shows that Stalin had spent so much time preparing for. So great, now you have this entire huge war economy infrastructure already set up. Well, guess what's going to happen next? He's going to turn his eyes right towards the rest of Western Europe, stomp through and wipe everybody out. The reason this deal, if it exists, was ever made was because Hitler probably thought he couldn't win. He couldn't take the entire world by himself, or maybe he thought he could, and this would have been just made it easier. Regardless of what you think might have happened, Churchill would have been an absolute nut job to actually accept the deal. I mean, Hitler would have just come back, taken Britain, stopped, consolidated, and then gone after the United States. If this deal had been reached, it might have meant the end of the world, frankly. It would have meant a global Nazi empire. I think this adequately shows that on some level, Hitler knew it was going to be the Soviet Union that was going to beat him. He knew that it was probably only the Soviets that really had the power to do so. After all, in the end, the Soviets did most of the fighting. They were the ones who really, you can say, actually beat Hitler, who actually beat the Nazi war machine. And Hitler despised the Soviets the most. I mean, he thought communism was a Jewish conspiracy. It's a relatively lunatic idea. But in the end, I think it shows that the true enemy of the Nazis was not the rest of Western capitalist Europe, that many countries, in Eastern Europe, were very happy to just peacefully turn over all their countries to the Nazi Empire. The Soviets were the real enemy of the Nazis. Thank you for watching. Please comment and rate the video. If you liked it, hit subscribe or check out some of these other great videos. If you wish, share it on social media. While you're at it, why don't you follow me on Twitter? And if you got time, go on over to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available.